Hi class, today's lesson is on checks and balances. So first we need to introduce our government. So the government of the United States is divided into three different parts or three different branches. The first branch is the executive branch, and the job of the executive branch is to carry out the law or enforce the law, or another way of thinking about it is to enforce the rules. Make sure everybody's following the law and following the rules. And the main part of the executive branch is the president of the United States, and the president's advisors that help the president. The next branch is the legislative branch, and this is the branch that makes the laws. So this is the branch that has Congress, which is made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and these people make up the laws. They sit in a room that looks like a large auditorium, and they will hear suggestions for laws or think about laws themselves, and then they end up voting on the law to try to get a law passed. They're the lawmakers. The last branch is going to be the judicial branch, and the judicial branch interprets the laws, or another way of putting it is it reads the laws and determines if the law is correct or not. They find the meaning of the laws. And this is headed by the Supreme Court and also other federal courts. Okay, so let's dive deeper into what checks and balances are. So we have these three branches of the government. They all have equal power. No branch is stronger than the other. And the system of checks and balances makes sure that each branch is doing their job, that they're not gaining too much power, they're only doing their job and doing it correctly. So that's why it's called checks and balances. Each branch has the ability to go and check on the others, make sure they're doing the right thing. And if they're not doing the right thing, they're going to use their checking powers to balance things out because we want all three branches to have equal power. Nobody should have more power than the other. The president should not have more power than the Congress. The Congress should not have more power than the Supreme Court. So let's look at the individual powers, the checking powers that each one has. So let's start with the first one, executive branch. So checks on the legislative. So what can the president, the executive branch, do towards the legislative branch to check it? Well, the first one says can propose laws to Congress. So the president cannot make law, but they can propose or suggest a law so that Congress has to decide on it. The next one is to veto laws that Congress passes. So if the lawmakers, Congress, decide to create a law, the president has the final say of veto. Veto is just a fancy word for saying no. The president can actually say no to any law that Congress wants to pass. The next one is can call special sessions of Congress. We won't go too much detail for this one. The next one is makes appointments. This is just a fancy way of the president hires people, chooses who's going to be in charge of what. So various departments in the government, the president can decide, I want you in charge of this, I want you in charge of this. So that's what making appointments means. And the last one on this list is negotiates foreign treaties. And what that means, just fancy was saying, they get to make agreements with other countries. A treaty is just a fancy word for agreement. So they can make agreements, any sort of agreements with another country. Let's look at now the checks on the judicial branch. So this is what the president can do towards the judges, the Supreme Court. For one, the president appoints the judges. So if there's an open spot for the judges, the president can choose the next judge that's on the Supreme Court. Next, the president can grant pardons to federal offenders. So a pardon, what that means is forgiveness. The president can give forgiveness to someone who has committed a crime on the federal system. So someone who is actually in federal jail right now, the president can give what's called a pardon, and they get to go home free. It's called a forgiveness. The president might use this if they see a crime that a person was accused of being committed, and maybe they decide that they've served their time, or maybe they were falsely accused in their eyes, the president can pardon an individual. All right, let's take a look at Congress now, or the legislative branch. So these are the lawmakers. Let's see what the lawmakers can do towards the president's executive branch. So the lawmakers can override a president's veto. If we remember what happened in the earlier scenario, Congress decides to vote for a law. They're almost there, but the president doesn't like it, and the president can say no. They can use that veto power. Well, Congress, if they get enough votes, they can override the veto, or they can kick that no away and get the law passed anyway. And this is hard to do, but they do have that power if they could get enough votes for it. The next one is confirms or rejects executive appointments. So if we remember from that earlier example where the president can make appointments or hire people, choose someone for the job, for a certain job, Congress can confirm it, which means they say it's okay, that person's good for the job, and they let it through. Or Congress can reject it, saying, no, the person you selected for this job is not good. We reject it. We stop it from happening. So these are the powers on this list to check the president. Let's look at the checks on the judicial branch. One, they can create lower federal courts. We won't go into that too much. Next is to impeach and remove judges. So Congress, legislative branch, has the power to kick a judge out. If we remember from the president can appoint a judge, they can hire a judge for the job, but Congress or the legislative branch can actually kick a judge out. So if they think that a judge is being improper, they have the power to impeach and remove a judge. Next one is can propose amendments to overrule judicial decisions. So an amendment is a fancy word for saying a new law that changes things. And judicial decisions, that just means any actions done by the judicial branch. So what this is saying is that they can create new laws that can change anything that the judges made decisions on. And like with the executive branch, they can approve or reject appointments of federal judges. So if a judge is being put for a job as a judge, Supreme Court justice, the legislative branch can say, yes, that's a good judge, or can reject it, no, we don't want that judge. Last is the judicial branch. Again, this is the courts. They find the meaning in the laws, and what that usually means is if they determine if the law is fair or unfair. So what are their checks on the executive branch? They can declare executive actions unconstitutional. So executive actions, it's a fancy name for the things that the president does. And the judges, the courts can declare if it's unconstitutional, or another word meaning unfair or illegal. So they can determine if the stuff that the president does is fair or unfair or illegal. The checks on the legislative branch is going to be similar. They can declare acts of Congress unconstitutional. So any of the actions that the legislative branch, the Congress, does, they can determine if it is constitutional or not. So one big example is the Congress passes laws. If they pass a law, but then the judicial branch, the judges read the law and they say, wait a minute, that's actually an illegal law or it's unfair, they can strike it down, they can call it unconstitutional, and they'll kill the law. The law no longer applies. They get rid of the law. So they have the power to get rid of laws or actions that the Congress does. So this chart is kind of a simplified view. There are going to be more powers and checks that the branches have, but this gives us an overview. Again, our government is divided into three parts here. They're all equal in power, and to prevent any one side from getting too powerful, they have these powers called checks, and once they use the checks, it will balance it out, make sure everybody is on equal footing again.